gorgeous listener. I have a treat for you of integrative psychotherapeutic depth. I am sitting in front of Abigail Iquo Isuo, and we're really about to take you on a bit of a journey. I first experienced this wonderful practitioner, gosh, it must have only been about 6 months ago. She was my interviewer for an experience that fundamentally changed the trajectory of not just this year of my life. It reconnected me to the focus in my life, which has to always be a place of love, honesty, and service, and those three things combined. And as I sat with her, I was deeply, deeply struck by her presence, which of course makes sense because Abigail has been in this realm of self-development, transformation, healing, body-mind connection, integrative therapy for over 2 decades. She is one of the leaders of the Path of Love, which was the same retreat that I attended. It is now a 30-year strong, incredible transformative experience that, gosh, it really accesses people at their space of deepest vulnerability, as well as actually their deepest interconnective safety. In community, we face the things within ourselves that are the most challenging. And in community, we learn to access the healing that is latent inside. And so in light of that, and in light of all of the other work that Abigail does, she was just telling me before we joined the broadcast that she has been like back-to-back retreat experience and has been deeply energized by that, which I really relate to. I'm going to read you just a little tiny snippet from her own writing, because I think it captures very beautifully what she is passionate about, what she's committed her life to. Abigail believes that our authentic, essential selves are buried under our conditioned personalities and inherited belief systems. Without an honest inquiry into our true nature, we are struck by hardships, relational challenges, and traumas in every area of our lives. It sounds really simple to state that, but I think that there is something so profound in recognizing that the majority of people are operating in the world, functioning, managing, posturing in some senses as a somewhat extrapolated version of themselves. And I'd love for us to start there, Abigail, and let us know your take on the process to authenticity.
Gosh, what a beautiful, rich question. I think I have a passion for sure for potential, for evolution, for transformation. And of course, that requires radical honesty. It requires absolute radical responsibility. And that means really having a love of the truth, not truth how we understand it in terms of opinion or perceptions or beliefs, but truth at its core, truth in our essential selves. And I think that's where my fascination has always been, where all of us have learned how to survive by having incredible front windows, personalities, masks, and we need them. They are what we call intelligent strategies in order to help us survive, in order to gain approval, validation. But they're not strategies of evolution or transformation or any road back home or into authenticity. And so a lot of my work is about being able to turn inward. And we're kind of the only species that can do that. And to look at that inner architecture and decode the symbols, the signs, the structures, the mechanisms that, of course, are an infrastructure that have helped protect us from our perceived fears, let's say, in the world. And so really kind of deconstructing that scaffolding that has supposedly held us together often means that we go into places of chaos or collapse. And I think that's a necessity. And I think a lot of my work is really helping to facilitate this ability and notion to be able to sit and stay with the discomfort, to sit in the gap of not knowing, to really understand that when the caterpillar is on its journey to become the butterfly, it is mush in the middle. And in that place, it can feel like desperation. It can feel like deep depression. It can feel like the world is completely falling apart around you. And it's in those crucial moments that I feel in our society, what we are guided towards often is medication or finding the next methodology or finding the next technique that makes us better, takes us into this place of efforting and trying to perfect and regulate our emotions and our feelings and our sensations. And I feel that just keeps us locked in a hamster wheel. And so many people are then in this place of, I've done so much work, but nothing is changing. But it's just doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. So being able to really sit with that discomfort and that, deep layers of desperation where we've lost our compass, we've lost our map, is essential. And that's where the radical responsibility and deep desire to know truthfully what is it that really matters, who am I at my core, is essential. And it's in those dark shadow places that we have labeled negativity or pain or suffering or whatever it might be, that the wounds can turn into wisdom if we have the capacity to stay present and recognize that we're not fragmented, but we are a deep internal process that really requires attention.
Gosh, there's so much in that response. It's so rich. What you were making me think of is, I suppose, the question for many of us, even those of us that are in this field, which is, can I bear? Can I really bear to look at it? And in the staying inside of the discomfort, we're in the staying with the discomfort, which is what you're describing. Is there a recategorization or a bringing inward or a reconciliation that gets to happen in the person's relationship with themselves, which so often people spend the majority of their time trying to find through closing the relationship with the external party or through taking their parents to therapy? Or it seems to me that what you're describing in this radical responsibility piece is that actually the answer to your suffering is in-house, but it takes huge commitment and huge courage to be willing to accept that and then to be willing to go there as many times as you need to go there with as many different lenses in order for there to shift.
I think it's exactly that. There is such a deep passion in me to make this style of work, let's say, a lifestyle, because it really is a different approach and a different path to life. It's one where we're not externalizing anymore or judging or blaming, shaming, pointing the finger, which is so easy to do. But it's more so in everything that we meet becomes a mirror of really our deepest places inside. Where we think we're not free, we are in these places and we get triggered. They are deep doorways into this internal space. And for me, the most exciting thing is to keep reconnecting and reclaiming and recalibrating who I am. That has to be a deep, deep love for self and for life itself. And really, then we get to feel that that's exactly what we are. We are life. We are nature. We aren't separate. And so the difference in these paths is moving from this pain of separation into a recognition that everything on my path is me. Plato once said that nothing exists except me. But it's not one of those things you understand intellectually. And this work is about kind of dropping down into the deeper cells of our intelligence and inherited wisdom of billions of years lives inside of this incredible being that we find ourselves to be. This vessel has these deeper intuitive intelligences, instinctive intelligences, emotional, spiritual, visceral intelligences. And it's like aligning all of these intelligence often means that we are then becoming life, and we're not making these kind of calculated decisions, but there's this instinctual piece that becomes our response.
Those that can't see what Abigail's doing, her gesturing, there's this quality in her hands of kind of an emergence. It's like something is coming up through the body and it's coming out through the human being. And I know that embodiment, integration in the sort of body-mind sense is also very big in your work, which makes a lot of sense given what you're describing of life force, chi. You can't really avoid the lived experience, much as we might try to, or much as we might try to live in brain dominance, because on some level it feels that that would be protective or it would give us an advantage or for whatever reason that we might have. I'm curious how that piece came in for you, because you're also an EMDR practitioner, so I know that you work with the world of the soma. How did that come into your work? Why did that start to feel so important?
I feel that as a child, I was so in my body. I was really the energetic type, like physically and viscerally, I would really experience, like kind of, nature and touch was so important. And I was an athlete. And so I did decathlon, and my body really was my magic, if you like. I ended up playing netball for England. It's one of those kind of, I know it's like it feels like another lifetime ago. I was like 16 or something. But it was one of those experiences where I am just so energetically aligned. And I know when I'm out of contact with my body, I feel it. It's icky. And it's true. I'm using my hands to, because it almost feels like there's a fountain, there's a source that actually I know when it's fluid. It's a little bit, when we're young, little girls, I can only speak for myself in this sense. Being a little girl, that sensuality that I remember waking up in me, which of course through adult eyes looks like sexuality, but in eroticism and things, but in that innocence, in that real, truthful purity of being a little girl, the sensuality wakes up, and I remember it waking up in this fluid way, and I remember it filling my whole being. And I also remember in teenagehood when actually now sensuality has a different tone to it in relation to others. And I remember at times just kind of blocking that internal sensation and really kind of on some level tightening, which I now know now it would be the diaphragm, and locking off what are, our first three chakras, and all of a sudden recognizing that, oof, these three energetic centers don't actually belong here, can be quite dangerous if these three are meeting the top kind of spaces of my being, like in my heart and my voice. If I let that instinctual flow really guide me, then it's dangerous because I actually can come out quite explosive, quite expressive. And so I realized I learned to tone myself down. And I think that's an experience that as humans, we all have on some level. We learn to suppress and hold back. And because I was in touch with my body in that innocence, like we all are in our playful childhood times, noting that it wasn't there anymore was something that was really always in the background. Oof, that playful spontaneity, mischievous play is actually, oh, it's far away from me. Where's it gone? And I feel that it was always in the background, that real desire to come back home, come back to that essential place that is innocent and pure and has a beauty and an aesthetic internal feel. That's the felt sense, the intelligence of the body.
Yeah, I mean, and what you remind me of there, which touches on a couple of the other points that I want to make sure that we cover today, is that sense of I have to be living my life relative to me. Like my ecosystem, my sense of inner self-reception, my wholeness, that has to be the center point that I operate from, because anything else fundamentally is liable to me contorting or distorting or manipulating myself for exactly the reasons that you're describing. That and it's not just women, I was about to say for so many women, there's that temptation to shrink, whether it's physically or to shrink in terms of the extent of rage or extent of creativity or the sensuality or sexuality of their self-expression. But it's not just women. I mean, I work across genders, and I know so many men that are way more timid than their base nature because they've come to socialize themselves in such a way where they're adult, quote unquote, and they're polite, and they're the model of responsibility or the model of a father that was projected down onto them when they were children. And what you start to see, and I know that you experience this in your work on retreat and also in one-to-one, is that the emergence of the true self, when it starts to come through, it's like sunlight. It is so beautiful. And of course, for that person, it's literally energy creating. Whereas before, the toning down was also dampening energetically and really dampening in terms of the actions that they would take and the outcomes that they would receive. You suddenly see them burst open, sometimes tentatively, but over time it becomes really their consistent way of being, which of course makes them so much more of a fit for the things that the heart really deeply desires. But they can only get it sustainably from actual self rather than postured self.
Absolutely. This is such an important piece because what I feel you speak to is direct experience. And I think as facilitators over time, you learn that you aren't teaching methodologies. You aren't impregnating techniques. You really are learning how to meet each individual that is attracted to the way you facilitate this work. And in doing that, what a privilege and an honor to then meet each person for me that I work with really for the first time and keep that real brilliant magic alive. It's not one size fits all. I don't know better than you know how to live your life. What I can do is reflect back and be a mirror that verbalizes perhaps what is being projected out and what therefore could be a helpful fit for that internal gaze to help decode the internal architecture. Their symbols, their codes, their beautiful architecture that lives inside. It's like kind of a tapestry. I know we touched on it a little when we were just chatting before, but it really is like being the conductor of an orchestra, and every single note counts. And that means the notes of the sadness or the notes of the fear, the notes of the ecstasy, and the notes of the joy. But this is another thing I find fascinating, how we give meaning or interpret what we're experiencing is so incredibly private and personal. And so another part of feeling so privileged to do this work with people is I get to enter with the person a sacred space inside. And that sacred space inside has meaning that our language and linguistics really don't give justice to. How actually one person describes sadness and experiences it in their being could be so different for how it emerges in me. And so learning over and over again and really, yeah, learning to be the innocent bystander that facilitates this private sacred space is a direct experience. And it's from that space that I do the work to the best of my ability in presencing. And from that space, how can you get tired?
Yeah, I completely agree. There's something that is unendingly fascinating and always has been for me about other human beings. I would say for me, I find other people more fascinating than me. I'm really committed to doing my own work. And every time there's a shift or there's a click, I absolutely get that feeling of achievement. But what is much more beautiful for me is exactly what you're describing. And I want to credit you for the work that you do in that sense, because to be able to stay present, compassionate, curious, neutral, and actually even to have the skill that someone invites you in, because that they come to a coaching session or they come to a therapy session does not mean that they have invited you in. It takes real refinement and skill to be able to be that person for someone, which of course, when it's done well, is then the corrective experience of a lifetime, because it is so rare that we truly meet people nude, us and them.
It's beautiful that you use that word nude, because as you were speaking, I was thinking, yeah, we get naked together. And to be able to get naked together, you have to have a fundamental connection with basic trust. And basic trust isn't just basic in the sense that we might see it. It's fundamental trust. And most of us in humanity that we're going through life surviving and efforting have come to a place where we are self-efficient and we think we have to do it all on our own. And that comes from a deep rupture with trust in life itself. And so really coming back where we have two people or a group of people, depending on in which capacity I'm working, we have to have that plug in. I have to be plugged in to trust. And this, I think, is another foundational layer of my work that really I am practicing over and over again, trust, because actually without that, it's impossible to surrender or to let go and know a fundamental truth for me, which is there are no mistakes. You know, we have this microcosm that we shrink everything down, but this microcosm is so attached to the macrocosm, and we can go to the infinite in regards to the macrocosm. We just have this one microscopic view, but if we are able to open up, everything I feel plays in this incredible tapestry, symphony of life. It's a dance. I really, and of course I forget often. And the reminder has to come. And I think as I'm getting older, the reminder is stronger and stronger that I'm in a dance. This life is play. This life really is about allowing myself to be the river that flows. I'm one of the waves in the ocean. I don't make myself the wave. I am the wave. I am the ocean kind of thing. And that for me becomes such an important guide. One of the pieces that we get to learn is that it's very difficult for humans to live without problems. So we go on creating them and finding the next one and the next one, and the next one. And it's like, actually, what happens if this play is about remembering and recognizing that there are no problems? The problems that we create are the beliefs and the conditions that we cling to, and we attach to them because at one point that felt like security. But that security is now a prison. And so to step out of the prison, we have to do that radical confrontation and face the inconvenient truths, uncomfortable notions that we think have held us together, and face the idea that, oh my gosh, maybe I'm going to fall apart, and step into the mush and actually trust the unknown. And there we have it again. We got to come back again and again. The love of the truth and trust.
What I adore about listening to you, other than the fact that I'm mentally inventorying so many of these statements, um, is that I'm thinking a little bit about your role as a leader, actually. And I think that that is, for me, my take on it is that's an elected role, ideally. We were talking before we turned on the recording button about the ego and the danger of not noticing that that very strong, vivid force has begun to sneak its way into your mentality, your identity, your actions, your outcomes. And I think for people that are elected into a role of leadership, even more the temptation to lean into the satisfaction of feeling empowered, or the satisfaction of receiving praise, or being placed on some sort of slightly artificial but also rooted in truth pedestal. And it feels to me as though in describing your philosophy and in capturing what it is to be really awake as a human, which is being willing to let go of the artifice that the mind is so tempted to create and to stick to, what of course happens is you come into a place of wholeness that is also quite adaptable, quite flexible, quite humble, open to be taught. And if I think about you in your leadership roles, when I've seen you in that space, that's what I felt. I felt that you were deeply there, you were deeply in service, but also you were deeply able to hold a room full of 40 people between staff and student, and to be the leader without in any way creating roughage in the emotions of the people present. And I know that you're also writing a book, and one of the themes is around sovereignty. I'd love it if you would just speak to your sense of leadership and how you comport yourself as an elected leader.
Oh, it's beautiful for you to encapsulate it and feed it back in such a way. I think my role as a leader in Path of Love, for example, has been such an instrumental and instructional role in on many levels and layers. The Path of Love is an entity. And what I mean by that is energetically, it holds such wisdoms. It's, of course, been going for 30 years, but within the actual process itself, I think we were touching on it, there are so many artifacts and so many groups and so many structures and so many characters and personalities formulating the actual constellation that creates the movement and the transformation and the magic that the entity or Path of Love brings. And it's actually 40 participants and 30 staff. So it's like 70 people. It's a big outfit. And I think over time, I have absolutely learned that if you step out or your ego takes over, there's a slap that's coming. It's a cosmic, energetic slap that is just one of those Zen sticks that puts you back into a form of alignment, that you remember that you're not doing this. Life is happening through you. And for that to really take hold, there has to be a looseness, there has to be a flexibility, there has to be a capacity to really dance with the chaos that creates order, and then really recognize that order can become rigid and structured, and as it does and as it can, it then has to melt and then dissolve into something very, very different. So the notes and the silences and the subtleties are really required. And so you haven't got time to think that you know how to do that. There is, and I know you can't do surrender, but there is something about being taken and becoming a life force that is fluid. And I think that's that sensation and sensual energy I spoke about earlier is something that I can feel in my being while I'm in that whole container, let's say. And I think it's such an important part of leadership. There is not one person that is the same. That's that beautiful saying, no one has the same fingerprints as you. So they cannot be met in the same way. Even there's some similarities, because at the core of each and every one of us, there is an essential and core truth. But our expression of this point of light that actually exists within each of us is so uniquely different, and it speaks for that person. And so that whole leadership piece is something that has fascinated me, because it's a feminine and a masculine union. And it's not power over, and it's not me in control, but it is at any moment being able to act appropriately given the circumstances. And often people have asked, but well, hang on a second, you said that here, and now you're saying this here. And I think that's the beauty, because it's paradoxical. And it suits my nature also. When I was younger, I would say, that might be flaky. But when I'm older and I have this maturity, there's a solidity to it. Because there is a beauty to recognizing it's not one size fits all, and this particular expression or action in this moment is required. And it might be flamboyant and it might be noisy and it might be loud. But in this moment, a subtle silence and real ability to let go and surrender is required. And those are the parts that I'm starting to really fine tune, and I want very much to capsulate, to put into a structure in a particular immersive book, which actually brings with it the initiatory aspects. And that's a combination of the psycho-spiritual, which I think is required in leadership, together with the soma, together with the wisdom of plant medicines, together with all of the parts that I know work, from breath work to dance movement to the cognitive understanding of how life functions, so that it becomes a holistic journey. Because for me, it's one big experience, and it's like we meet life as we are, not how life is. So, what is that inner attitude? What is it made up of? And how does that then formulate our approach and the way we touch life and the way we are experienced in life and the way we connect and relate and keep evolving? And that for me is leadership.
I think it's so important what you're describing because so often the temptation, particularly when we're talking about therapeutic practices, okay, well, we're either in the present or we're going back. There's some sort of archival tendency. And I know that for a lot of the people that think, oh my God, I spent decades doing the work, how am I still in this place of suffering or of discordant relationship or of frustration with my unfulfilled professional potential? So much of the time, the missing piece is what you're describing, which is the inner evolution that then is matched by an outward action, an outward momentum, a charge, a charging forwards. And again, if we go back to that elected leadership piece, that's sort of what our leaders ideally are being appointed for, is what you describe, which is the benevolent community evolution of this whole thing, which also holds the individual as prized within it. So we're focused on the collective, but we're also focused on that unique blueprint of a human, which of course means that we have to be really with people. And that's what you're describing with this 70-person cohort. There is not time to be anywhere other than right with them, right there. And it speaks to what you're describing about the variation in cadence, the variation in noise, the variation in tone that is called for as life moves through me, that is called for at any one given moment as the perfect answer to that particular challenge. And you are masterful at that. I've seen you do it. I've seen you go from big. I mean, we're talking about a very tall, very striking woman. You go from your presence being really big to being right down there, crouched next to someone, right on their level, speaking very softly. And that's artful. And I deeply know that it is deeply intuitive and therefore truthful. It's nothing that you're doing, it is a fluid way of being matched to your service calling.
It's beautiful just to really feel into what this work actually brings and how it feels and the deep experience of it. Because I'm fundamentally kind of connected to the solidity of it. I really feel that the roots and the earthy, grounded part of this work is essential. This is not a spiritual bypass. It's like we are humans and we are living the experience as vessels that can feel. And I think that's one of the things that we in our society have been distanced from for many reasons. And numbness and paralysis and kind of speaking from the head up is a little bit our norm. And so it is true, therefore, then we get stuck either in ruminating about our regrets and our past, or we are anticipating what might happen in the future. And I think that kind of encapsulates the trilogy of the deep-seated fear in us, the grief in us, the anger in us. And those particular aspects, I feel, if they're not addressed, they are the ones that are guiding us. And so being able to name within ourselves the fear or the regret or the anger and the grief, all of this kind of concoction allows us to metabolize let's just call it the shadow. And if we metabolize that, then it gives such a trunk and a level of solidity. And you mentioned before the sovereign piece. And this is something that I feel comes after we do a deep descent. And I know there are many schools of thought out of there, but what my deep belief in what I've experienced and what I see over and over again is as humans, we are battling with all kinds of internal conflicts that become externalized and projected outward. And so the starting point, if we want to make a difference collectively, has got to be to recognize our own internal conflict. And that internal conflict and the integration of it or the healing of it comes by learning how to be present and not being in the past and not being in the future, but learning presence and also learning that we don't have to do it all. So I wake up in the morning and before I get out of bed, 30 seconds just to recognize, hey, what's going on in this body? And to realize throughout the night, my body has been healing. I didn't tell it to breathe. I don't tell it to kind of process the even before conversation. I don't actually put the oxygen through the places or tell my brain to rewire. That is happening. And I think these are the fundamental aspects that we've forgotten and we take for granted. And then we get up, we jump out, and we're all of a sudden on a mission and we're losing this. And time is kind of, going so super fast. We go from school to being already retired in like kind of nanosecond. And then we think, oh, where did it all go? So coming back again and again to this place of presence, I think allows for the conflict. So one of the conflicts I worked with in myself was this conflict of what you described before, which was being super powerful and energetic and having a lot of strength, let's say, that I had to also squash down. I'm a woman, and in this world, a big woman who I feel I was 6 foot when I was 10, and have this energy, and it's like often in the face of certain circumstances can be big, can be experienced by some people as intimidating. They're going through their particular process. So how do you kind of squash that down? Now, if I do that by myself, I suppress myself. So already I start to create contractions that are not healthy. And then on the other side, I have a deep side where I have a huge sensitivity. I really can feel my heart really recognizes the pain in the world and in humanity. And it's that how do you kind of integrate those deep differences, the paradoxical kind of opposites? And I really recognize that it's the tension between the opposites that really is such an incredible gift. And when I recognized that and I was able to really keep coming back to that tension and not be reactive with the tension and not have to act on it and not have to justify it and not disown it or hide it or disassociate from it, but to be with that tension, it's volcanic. But learning the containment and the expansion that comes with that without leaking anywhere has been such an important journey for me. Because now it does allow me to really be big when I need to be big and to be very sensitive and loving and caring. Not that the one is bad or good, but that actually they're different. And that really when I own both sides, there's a unification that happens, and men may speak through me in their own language, which is very different from whether it's one or the other. It's
I
both and.
It's both, and I so relate to this. I was thinking, Abigail, one of my emerging areas of focus, which caught me rather by surprise this winter, was romantic relationship. And I am someone that has spent a huge amount of I was about to say my professional life being exactly that. I'm very, very good at task execution. I'm actually pretty comfortable in a relative leadership position because the focus on the collective outcome is what I'm always orienting to, and that gives me a courage that I probably wouldn't have if I was free floating on an initiative that was purely for me. I get teased actually. One of my very good friends is she's a tantrika and a kind of a sexual expander, and she teases me that I have some work to do around desire. And so what started to happen over the course of this winter is the soft feminine side of me that actually deeply feels both the suffering that you were referencing, but also the intimate beauty of vulnerable love that really started to emerge. And of course, I had been on Path of Love in June, so we're not surprised that this is what happened this autumn. I have a CEO inside of me who's quite masculine, and gender fluid, and I have a soft, tender female that deeply desires to hold and to be held. And they have been having a really interesting time trying to relate to each other. And you describe this process where you go from struggle or you go from exclusive focus on one or the other into relationship, which is essentially the equivalent of romantic relationship. I'm just bringing my masculine and my feminine together in hopefully the same way that will come in my partnerships in the future. But I wonder
Yes.
if you have any thoughts about that, and actually particularly around romantic relationship and staying in your wholeness, staying in your integrated authenticity, because I think it's one of the areas that our very heady practitioners actually often struggle with the most. They're kind of okay when they're in professional mode, but when they are accessed in that place, we're not talking adult presence, we're talking young.
When we get kind of captured by the little young infant inside. I think this is such a big piece, and it's a part of a work that is developing and will come to fruition, I think, next year, which is very much about looking at the feminine, masculized feminine, and the masculine who's also possessed by the feminine, let's say. This is more kind of Jungian work, where as women, in order to get by as the decades have passed, we have learned to be quicker, faster, stronger, and more assertive than men, and we're good at it. And so, on some level, we become within ourselves this masculinized version of who we are. We're dynamic, we are cold, we can cut straight through, but it is at the expense of that internal need for nurture and love and softness and care. We have been kind of conditioned to believe that vulnerability is some terrible weakness. And of course, in the corporate world and in the boardroom, vulnerability will not get us very far. And so society reflects, and then we get rewarded by being this non-emotional, cutthroat, we can kind of get the job done, efficient, feminine being, in our trouser suit. And actually, it's to our kind of, detriment on the internal level and the sensual level. And I have so many women who are so incredibly successful, but they have a deficiency in relating and having romantic relationships. And they get to a certain place and think, oh my gosh, my biological clock is over. And then there's a new realization that I might not become a mother for those women who want to become. Some don't, and that becomes a real breakthrough on one level to recognize I have developed, and dare I say it, my own internal penis where I want for nothing, you know, and I have that kind of rigid structure. I'm phallic in my way of approaching life. And then I wonder why actually my partner, if it's a heterosexual situation, hasn't approached me. Well, because we don't need anything. And so there's no space. And there isn't an ability to soften and mold and unify. And so that is the animus possessed woman, where we are now really needing to recognize that we lost that trust in life. We lost our real internal, delicate ability to flow and become again a river and not have to have all of the answers and do it on our own and be completely self-contained. And it's such a miracle moment when I see and watch that, and I know it in myself as I described, and I see and watch that now in women where we can stand and really embrace our shame. And
Mm.
shame is that fear of disconnection. And then we recognize that actually our fear of what might happen in relation to disconnection has already happened. And it's like, how do I absolutely embrace that? And again, hold the innocence of my being that learned that she had to kind of do it all on her own. And it is a return, I feel, to that deep, pure place inside where once upon a time we were spontaneous and mischievous and playful, and we didn't have to be so serious. And actually, we didn't have to take the whole world on our shoulders. And that's the feminine side. And of course, the equivalent happens for the masculine. And the masculine side is that actually they are anima possessed. And actually, instead, like you were pertaining to, of the man standing in his solidity, he's had to kind of squash his expression and squash his need to be seen and heard and held in his truth. And so often what you will find with men is they become quite moody, and actually there's a passive aggression, and it's so palpable. You can be in a room and you're like, what happened? And it's that kind of leakage of the unexpressed rage and the unexpressed kind of masculinity that they've been taught that they're not able to be that assertive and kind of bombastic man who actually can get things done. Because I have so many male clients, and some of them come and say, what do you do? Can you hold a door open for a woman these days or not? And it becomes such a confusing territory that, again, coming back to be able to recognize that that's suppressed, the shadow, the expression of anger and rage that has such a connotation of wrongness is so essential. If we suppress that anger and the rage, and of course, males are really kind of condemned for being their angry selves, but that's because it's so squashed and then it just comes out in some kind of real rageful violence. And that's where we have the whole hooligan piece, or, in lots of kind of crazy murders that happen, because actually that energy inside is so fierce. And so really being able to recognize that anger is essential. It's our life force, it's our sensuality, it's our sexuality, it's our passion, it's our fire. And the learning is to be able to grow enough to contain the magnitude and the magnificence of all of these incredible sensations that have been so wronged.
Oh, I'm just suddenly aware that I've joked about this before we started the recording that we could just talk for hours. And I think that's true.
Yes.
So, for those that are wondering where we're going to be listing all of the incredible places that Abigail shows up, don't worry, the show notes will include all of her retreats and all of her emerging written work, and all of the places that you can find her. I think what you're talking about is just so critical. And if we think all of that is going on in romantic relationships, so fundamentally your relationship with yourself and your own emotions, that's ripe and rife. You've then got all of the ways in which you project onto the other all of the things that you need to be for them in order to be chosen. And I was talking to a client about this afternoon she's an incredible human. But we were talking about this kind of shared narrative that, women need to be XYZ, certain size, or, certain level of placatable timidity in order to be chosen by a man. And the whole can I be chosen thing is probably one of the greatest sicknesses of our time. And my sense is that everything that you're describing, when you integrate, when you come home in that ever emergent, never done process, less and less are you worrying about being chosen, because the baseline, the foundation, the fundament, like you were talking about, is this is me, and therefore it's already done. It's already been chosen. And that power rests in me. It doesn't rest in another to make me feel acceptable to myself or to them. It rests in me, and that is a heady responsibility, but it's also the most liberating one you can ever have.
Oh, it's so fascinating because what you're describing is our internal unmet needs, the unfinished business. And for me, that really is such an important place to begin work, especially in relating, but to come back to our authentic wholeness, because we carry that has been missed, absent, hidden, disassociated from childhood. And those structures and behaviors that we have learned to encapsulate those unmet needs have to be broken down. And it's almost like energy starts in us and then it gets interrupted. And then we formulate these interpretations that must mean I'm not good enough. That must mean I'm unworthy. That must mean I'm not going to be chosen. And then it really disturbs and distorts our lenses, and we look only through those lenses. So then we collect evidence to support our internal beliefs, and we're brilliant at it. And so it becomes this hugely self-fulfilling prophecy. And then what do? We go out and we attract the partner that will absolutely amplify those beliefs and those perceptions. And then we will say, you see, I told you so. And then move on and break up and go to the next one. But that meeting where we are looking and finding in our partner that we feel is our distortion or unmet need, if we point it out and we project it, we lose the opportunity to take that moment to come back to self and really heal. Not that we do the healing, but that we have a deep recognition and realization, real eyes. Then we start to look at the absolute issue with real eyes. And in that place, we melt the wound or the pain because we see it authentically, we see it truthfully. And as soon as we absolutely integrate, heal, or transform that part that was ruptured, then we look differently, and that we see in the other is transformed. And so now we don't need the other to fulfill what we didn't get, because it's a big lie. Because actually that was something that happened, but that's not happening now. And so in relationship, we have that profound possibility to do this deep fundamental healing piece, or experience this deep fundamental healing piece, which allows the evolution of our being and the capacity now to really meet and truly relate. Otherwise, we're looking for our mothers and our fathers, and believe me, we find them everywhere we go, until we learn to be our own mothers and our own fathers. So this child is no longer an orphan, then we can then stand in our true authenticity, and then we are oozing a very different energy. And then we attract an energy from the other. We can be the catalyst for the other's healing, because actually they don't have to stand in that wound to fix us, because we're not broken. And all of a sudden, everything melts into a place where now we have real relating. That doesn't mean your passions and your tensions and your kind of, frictions go away. But now we relate. We truly relate, and we're not adult children.
That real eyes thing is such a beautiful real eyes, such a beautiful phrase. And I think if everyone was taking away just one of the nuggets of what you shared, the idea that I am not broken and I therefore do not need to be fixed, but to use every single moment that you can where you are awake as an opportunity. That's the word that's been pinging the entire time I've been listening to you, is like, oh, opportunity, opportunity,
Yes.
opportunity, which everything can be if we choose to take that lens. And I'm always of the position, well, it's happening anyway. So you might as well decide what the perspective is that you want to take. You might as well make it useful rather than it happens to me anyway. And I take myself down a narrative of suffering or a narrative of negative identity that only, as you say, further entrenches the person that I don't want to be in, the things that I don't want to feel in the place that I don't want to be in.
I love that. I mean, I have a saying, which is an AFGO, which is another F in growth opportunity. It's really like that. Our life is prescribed by the meaning that we give it.
I'm reminded of the fact that my mum, ever since I was about 5 years old, has been saying to me, it's better than a slap in the face with a wet fish. Oh, you have been such a ride and a beautiful, rich treat for us, as I knew you would be. I wonder, is there a parting gift of words that you would like to leave the audience with as an encapsulation of what you feel so passionate about sharing?
You know, it probably based on my book. I haven't put the title out there, but it really is to remember we are magical beings, really etched in a very mysterious but magical infrastructure, the mystery of life. And it's like, stay fabulous, be radically responsible, take full ownership of the love of the truth, and really stand in what we've been given. Don't take it for granted. This life is a miracle. We are miracles.
That is such a beautiful parting. Listeners, I am going to make sure, as I promised, that you have every way that you could imagine of getting in touch with Abigail and her work. We adore you. You are the reason that we are here, quite literally. And so, if anything arises for you in the nature of listening to this conversation, if there are stirring thoughts, stirring questions, if you're not sure where to start, please reach out. We're always really open to that on the team, and we'll direct you wherever we can usefully do so to get you on your way.